Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie. I'm here with my husband, Jim, and we are going to talk about what's been going on in Jim's mind over the last couple of weeks. So the first thing that we're going to cover are data centers. We've been hearing a lot about them. They've been in the news. So we're going to talk about very, very simple question. Would you want a data center next door to where you live?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. Tell me, educate me, basically, because we've been having this conversation. One of the things we've been doing is we've been sitting in the living room, you in your recliner, me in my recliner, me with my heating pad, you with your heating pad. And we've been talking about data centers. And I think there was a reason that you got really interested in this. It was a podcast that you had listened to.
Yes. And I always forget the name of it, even though I've been listening to it for 2 years.
The AI Daily Brief.
AI Daily Brief.
And it's a great podcast.
I do. I like it. I listen to it at least 2 or 3 times a week.
Yes.
I still
And you
like
send
it.
me the links all the time. Every time I leave town, Jim's like, you should listen to this podcast. And
Yeah,
it's
but
Nathaniel from the AI Daily Brief, and Nathaniel does a great job. But
I didn't like it this time.
you didn't like it this time.
That doesn't mean I won't listen to him again. I'm not one of those people that I get, just because you said something I didn't like once, I'm never going to listen to you again. But he did he had a conversation about data centers. And I've heard a lot of people that don't live in rural areas, him being one of them probably, talking about data centers. And I thought his whole approach was flippant.
Flippant.
I thought it was dismissive, and I didn't like it. So I decided to dig a little deeper into what everybody's saying, because it's popping up on my feed all the time, but I'm not spending a lot of time normally reading all of them. But we have personal experience with this exact thing.
It's not just with data centers, but we have personal experience with just things coming into rural America that we're like, there's a new sand plant a mile down the road. The things that people tend to put into rural America.
Well, infrastructure pieces too, like fiber optic cables and high transmission lines. I mean, there's signs all over the place that say, keep the sand plant out. We see those in counties around us.
No rock crushers.
We
Yeah.
also see a lot of signs about, we don't want the windmills, high voltage transmission lines. At the end of the day, they come across these rural areas to get to the cities. The cities are in these smaller, in these geographic
compact areas.
Yeah, and they got to get there. And this has been going on forever. This is not new. This whole idea of infrastructure, whether it goes back to railroads, it goes back to oil pipelines. I had a cousin who spent his whole career being the landman guy.
The one that we go knock on the doors and talk about,
Absolutely,
eminent domain and
well,
going across
he didn't talk
their
about
land.
eminent domain. What he talked about was right-of-ways. I mean, that's what he did, was negotiate right-of-ways. Eminent domain is what people that are poor negotiators use, in my opinion, because they can't get the person to give in the way they want. So then they say they're going to use eminent domain.
All right, so let's dig into this.
So anyway,
You did a bunch of research, and then you came to me and you were going to educate me on your research.
Well, not only that, but I gave you the research because we're going to try something different. We're going to start posting. I like infographics a lot. I use Notebook LM to generate them because I really like them ever since Notebook LM could do it. I like the way it summarizes the information in a pictures. I like pictures.
Correct. So we're going to put the infographic on our website,
Yep.
and we will link to that infographic in our comment section on YouTube, and so that
Wherever else you can.
wherever else you can get it. And I'm also going to go ahead and post all the different locations that you pulled research from, because one of the things that we are learning a lot, especially in the age of AI, is that the research is important, making sure that it is correct, making sure it is vetted, making sure it's not AI made up, so where you're getting your information is very, very important in the age of AI.
Now, I use AI a lot,
Of
and
course.
I don't have a research group that works for me that does all the research and vets it all. I do randomly go through it to try to vet it with the assumption that if most of it is correct, then it's probably okay. There are probably some mistakes in it. I do my best, but in this particular case, the research was important, but we have personal experience. So let's look at the things that triggered this for me. The first thing that triggered this was
the podcast.
the podcast. The second thing was a conversation I had with you
Yes.
where you had talked to someone that we know personally.
So one of the things that's been happening, of course, when you talk about data centers, you start talking about the resources that the data center is going to need, and it's not just a piece of property to build on. The data center needs a lot of water.
Well, that's part of it, but let's step back for a second. A data center is not just a building; it's an infrastructure piece, which means the focus tends to be on the electricity because they use a huge amount of electricity. I got a number here. Data centers account for 90% of the 438,000 megawatts in request for the Texas grid.
Okay, so now let's narrow it down to Texas.
The joke in Texas is that our grid is like a third world country because we had Snowmageddon a few years back.
We do not rely on the federal grid.
Well, they don't want to connect to it because, God forbid if our grid can't handle generating enough power, we actually buy some from the federal grid. As my understanding is we don't have a way to do that because our illustrious politicians decided that would be way too smart.
I think it's the attitude of Texas can do it on their own.
Well, Snowmageddon proved otherwise.
It did.
Because we were without power for a long time.
And a lot of lives were lost.
So there's a lot of this request for. So people tend to focus on that. But that's only one narrow aspect of it because if you look at the research that I generated, they talk about how they're going to make the people that are creating these things have to pay for the hookup. In other words, and the additional infrastructure required to handle the power requirements they have. Well, that's great. But that's not how capitalism works.
Okay.
Because what's going to happen is, because we can't keep up with the generation we currently have, apparently with Snowmageddon, they claim they've upgraded it since then, but unless they've built a lot of extra power plants or connected to the federal grid, I'm not sure how they did. Firing all the people that were on the committee that made bad decisions didn't just fix the grid.
Correct. And
it hasn't been long enough for them to build power plants. So I don't know that we have any more energy capacity than we had before, and the ability to move it around requires those, high voltage transmission lines. But here's how it works: supply and demand. Yes, you increase your infrastructure, meaning you build bigger cables, more transmission lines. That's great. But if you can't generate enough and you're not buying it from somewhere else that's generating it, that means you have a more demand than supply. What happens when you have more demand than supply?
You have to start making people not have any, and
the price goes up.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. The price goes up, right?
Well, the first thing that happens is we started having brownouts and rolling blackouts and all that. But the price goes up.
The price goes up. Well, I didn't see anything where they said they were going to put down, some big number of dollars, which is small considering the amount of money they're putting into it. So that piece of it, they're going to say, okay, we're going to put down this money. We're going to increase our grid size, but we're not going to increase our capacity to provide it, which means supply and demand says supply stays stable, demand goes up. That means cost goes up, because that's the way you control what you were just talking about. Mm-hmm. You control people wanting it by charging them more.
Right.
Therefore, they don't buy as much. So if it keeps going beyond that, then you have the rolling blackouts. So that's one aspect of it, but that's the one everybody seems to be focused on.
Okay. Our personal experience specifically had to do with someone that we know whose family has property up around the Dallas area.
And that's one of the ones where the lawsuits are happening.
And they were basically being told that their water supply was going to be reservoired elsewhere.
Well, it's like something that weren't they trying to force them to bring it across their land?
That too, the lines.
They wanted to bring the lines across the land.
But the main thing is the reservoir. They were talking about the amount of water that it's going to take for them to put the center where they have putting it, and they're going to need a reservoir. So to get the reservoir built, they're going to be draining the water from upstream, downstream, I should say.
From somewhere.
And I mean, we even have that problem here. We had several illegal dams that were
built
destroyed.
In Llano County, up the line.
We destroyed them because people had built them illegally because they wanted to have a stock pond or they wanted to have an area.
No, it was a rich guy out of Houston
with a boat.
He wanted to have a place thing for his family when they came in from Houston once a month or once a couple of times a year. They wanted their own little reservoir so they
Yes.
could play in it.
Yes.
And
So he
they
built a dam on a
dam
tributary to the
and
Loudoun
didn't
River
get the Texas Natural Resource Commission's
to sign
permission
off on it.
to
Yes.
sign off
And
on
all of
it.
a sudden the people downstream were like, why is our water running out? And it's because this person who had a lot of money and did not think about the consequences
Don't care.
went in and built a dam. So that's
the problem.
the problem. So let's talk about this education. I
Okay.
was really surprised when we did start talking about this,
Okay.
is that what surprised me was that when we talk about the cloud, we talk about providing information, and we talk about,
We're talking about where all this AI is
where it
happening.
all is and where is it actually happening. I think that it's a misnomer whenever people say, well, it's in the cloud,
It's not floating above the earth.
because it's not. It's not floating above the earth.
No, it's sitting in a rural area.
It's sitting somewhere.
Most
It's
likely in a rural area.
correct.
They're building these, they like massive data centers in these rural areas because A, there's open land, it's cheaper, and what they tend to want to do is steamroll their way into. We've seen it many, many, many times where that's the place, I think it's Hillsboro.
Mhm.
I think that's where the
Mhm.
land was we were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
And they tried to create a moratorium.
Our granddaughter's FaceTiming us.
They tried to create a moratorium on the build, and the company came in with their lawyers and sued for $80 million, which was going to be the liability if they lost, and said the moratorium, you don't have the authority. They literally came in and told the people, you don't have the authority to decide what happens in your county.
Correct.
That's not
You
very
and I have
friendly.
this conversation
It's
a
not
lot.
very friendly.
It's about following the money, Jim. It 100% comes down to the person with the most money wins. And when you're following the money in this situation, this just happened in a different location here in Texas. There was a family that donated land with the intention of that land to become a park. And the city that they donated it to turned around and found a loophole and sold the parkland to a real estate developer for a data center.
That's correct. I think that was in Taylor.
And so you have, and it's all
They sold it
about
for
the
$10
money.
million. This farmer rancher donates property because he wants little kids to have a park to play in. And what they did was they shifted the responsibility of it to a nonprofit, which then shifted the responsibility to the city, and then the city sold it.
Yes.
And so that guy's donation, which it said in the original donation, it was supposed to forever be a park, but they found a loophole.
Yes.
They've tried to do that even here in Llano. I mean, there's a history of that kind of stuff happening here. And it's always the same thing. It's for the good of the community. It's going to bring in all these jobs, that kind of thing.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
The first thing we wanted to point out is that the cloud is not actually in the cloud, and people who live in the city need to understand that the information that they are getting, the resources that they are getting,
Okay. Well,
live somewhere.
what was that? The girl that was in your class at A&M?
Oh my goodness.
When the professor was talking about where
Eggs.
was
We
it
were
eggs or was
talking,
it beef?
no, eggs. We were talking about farm subsidies.
Yeah.
And of course, we were at Texas A&M University, and that's a lot of agricultural kids that go there.
Yeah.
And there was a girl in one of our classes that thought that we should not be doing farm subsidies. And one
Right.
of the guys in the class whose parents owned a farm made a comment, where do you think your eggs come from? And she basically said, well, they're in the dairy section of HEB.
Right.
And that's where she honestly, that's as far as her brain went, was that she gets them from the grocery store. She didn't see that those eggs actually show up at the grocery store already packaged
They come
from a farm
with
that has
chickens.
chickens, And so it was very
Well, I mean,
eye-opening for a lot of people in there, because, and it's the same situation happened to my sister. She was up in New York, and somebody was basically attacking her when they realized that she was from Texas, saying that Texas drove big trucks and we were wasting the environment. We were like using all the gas, and why do we need all these big trucks? And she looked at him and said, because I never could fit the very large bale of hay in the back of a Prius. And it's just, people don't understand that there is a balance that we are, as a society, we have lost the ability to achieve this balance.
Well, when it comes to exploitation of rural resources, I'm not sure. I mean, eminent domain was put in place because, in my opinion, I'm not a historian, but it was put in place because people were uncooperative and the greater good had to prevail.
But let's define who defines what the greater good is.
Well, and that's one of the things where I was doing my research, and I always discuss this with AI, which, by the way, I do know that every time I'm having these discussions, a data center is using power and generating tokens. This kind of thing happens, but I call it the good neighbor model.
Okay.
You don't have to be strong arm people. I know when my cousin used to talk, or we called him my uncle, when he used to talk about negotiating right of ways, he didn't go in with strong arm tactics. The same thing where I didn't, when we were building fiber here, and I was helping because we built fiber to Llano years ago before they gave all of the money they were going to use for building fiber to rural America. They gave it to Elon Musk for Starlink.
They actually did that.
I know.
That's a different
It was
podcast.
called the BEAD Act. And I went through years and years and years of trying to find funding for us to build it. When we were building it, we had to go across people's land.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we built some of it in like the highway right away, but some of it went across people's land, and we talked to them. In some cases, on the first iteration of it, that we were building some fiber, we actually offered to connect the fiber to the houses of the rancher because they had no chance of ever getting it. And this is before Starlink and, Elon Musk and all that stuff. They didn't have any chance of getting it. So they were thrilled because they were going to get fiber to their house.
And it was a fiber line. It wasn't like it was a high tension.
It wasn't a high tension line, which is a much different thing, but it's still the same idea. Look at what people try to be a little less strong arm.
That's true.
You're doing this stuff,
That's
and maybe you'll get a little bit better response.
I mean,
anyway,
I'd always come back to the Aaron Brockovich movie that I like so much.
Well, that's that whole first statement you made was based on that idea, right?
Okay. Yeah. And we actually had that here in town. We had a sand plant. It wasn't really a sand plant. It was more like a sand storage area. They were dredging a bunch of sand.
That's a sand plant.
But they weren't blasting. They weren't crushing rocks.
No, it wasn't a rock crushing plant.
They were dredging the river and they were selling the sand. And when the sand plant came in, there was a lot of people that were really upset about it because, it's a pollutant and
you just
lots of lights and lots of noise and everything else. So the owner of the sand plant bought a house directly across the river from the sand plant. And he moved in directly across the river. And I think that really helped people go, you know what? He's willing to live in the same neighborhood.
Well, and he also put in the way he was taking it from the river was much less invasive.
Mm-hmm.
And the city was already having to pay people to dredge because our reservoir where we store the water from the Llano River for the drinking water needed to be dredged out every once in a while because the floods come down and they dump all this sand in there. So he was actually helping do a service. And the people of Llano, I think, got some kind of discounts. I mean, he tried to be a good neighbor.
Yes.
But anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. I got us off track here.
Yes, you actually did. So let's talk a second about the water, the actual water, and about keeping the data centers cool.
That's a big deal.
Okay. So where does it actually come from?
Well, in Texas, there's not a lot of places that it can come from. One of the things, I disagree a lot of times with politicians, and I'm not really that shy about my opinion. But one of the things that I had read in my research that Greg Abbott had said that they were going to not only mandate that they have to pay for the connection cost to the grid. Now, he didn't address the fact that supply and demand problem, but he did address the connection cost. The second, and them having to upgrade the grid, but he also mandated closed loop water systems.
That's
because the problem is that if you don't make them, it's more expensive to do a closed loop cooling system, but it also cuts down on evaporative losses, which are massive. Mm-hmm. And they, once they initially get up and running and they do that draw of water, theoretically, they can go almost indefinitely without drawing much more water. They have to add some because they're going to lose some, but it supposedly dramatically reduces the water. That's good neighbor engineering.
Yes.
Because now you care about the fact building a data center in a place like Texas is not a great idea anyway.
Our water resources.
We have water problems here, and we know we have water problems. They're talking about building a pipeline from South Texas all the way up to the hill country just so they have enough water at some point in the future. Mm-hmm. This is a problem.
Yes, it is. I mean, your dad used to always say it. I mean, a lot of the water that we have here in the Texas area, especially in the hill country, comes from tributaries. And the tributaries are a water runoff. And the more straws you put into the tributary, the less water is going to go
Well,
downstream.
there's surface water in Texas, which is what you're mostly talking
Groundwater.
about, and then there's groundwater.
Mhm.
There are two. The surface water is rivers and lakes, stuff like that. But what typically happens in Texas, unlike a lot of places, you'll have. I'm going to get off on the water thing because I really like water, but I grew up in Texas, so I grew up here. But anyway, basically, what a lot of places have is they have sandy loam soil underneath,
Mhm.
and they literally drill down and they hollow out a hole, and the water's coming in from seepage through the sandy soil. It comes in and it fills the reservoir you just built underground.
Okay.
That's how it works in a lot of places, and that's great because that means you can pretty much drop a well anywhere, and water is going to seep in because it's all coming through this sandy soil. Here in Texas, it flows underground waters typically through cracks and rocks. It's like little underground rivers.
Right.
Or
So there's no soakage into the
there's
rocks.
no soakage. So if you get lucky and you drill into a crack, you get water.
Mhm.
If you don't, you just spent $7 or $8 or $10,000, $6,000 on a dry hole.
Mhm.
So the water's important here, and you can't just use it willy nilly to cool your H100s from NVIDIA.
And
So-
people are using it
well,
willingly.
and agriculture in Texas is supposed to be the number one use of it. That was another problem, by the way, I had with Nathan's comments. He was comparing water usage. You mentioned this once, where golf courses use a whole lot more water.
The number one user of water is a golf
Correct.
course.
But you know what? Here in Llano County, when it starts getting dry, our
They
golf
stop.
course gets really dry.
Mhm.
So we actually accommodate
They
for that.
spray paint the
They've
greens.
tried to get out and spray paint the greens. But he mentioned a thing about how avocado, not grow avocado, no, I think it was almonds he mentioned, and how much water they use. I don't think you can reasonably say that a data center can be compared to something I can eat.
It's true.
I can eat almonds.
Mhm.
Yes, you may use a lot of water. Maybe you shouldn't grow that. We shouldn't grow rice in South Texas. We know this. We've been doing it for 100
Now that
years.
we're in a water situation, maybe 100 years ago there was a lot more water.
Was
but
it?
Now there's not.
It
We
made
have to send
sense.
water to South Texas
You
a lot of
grew up in
times.
southeast Texas. I mean, there's a lot of marshy lands.
Mhm.
Seemed like a good place for rice. But the water they get comes from here.
Does now. A lot of
And
it.
it always did. It all drains to the
Right,
Gulf, and they're
right.
close to the Gulf.
There's not as much draining off
There's
anymore.
not as much drained off. Why? Because you mentioned earlier, too many straws in the reservoirs.
That's right. Too
So
many people have moved in.
anyway, Abbott has at least put some thought into it. Our governor, which
Mhm.
I'm, surprised.
Let's move on to the next topic while we still have time. What about jobs? Everyone's saying, "Oh, it'll be okay. We're going to bring all these jobs.
Yeah,
We're going to have all these jobs."
I always
in
say
town."
that. First, they want give me a tax break. Now, I'm not anti-AI, and I'm anti. I use AI. I'm not anti-data center. I'm anti-strong arming, and I'm anti, the bullshit quotient.
Let's have communication.
Let's just stop bullshitting. Just because we're from a small town doesn't mean we're ignorant. And when you say you're going to build a data center, it's going to bring these jobs in, those are mostly construction jobs.
Right.
I've been in data centers, lots of them.
Lots of construction.
There's not that many people working in those things once this construction's done.
Right.
You build out you've got a ton of jobs building out all that electrical infrastructure, that water infrastructure,
The
building
actual
buildings,
buildings.
all that stuff. Once you're done and you leave, there's a lot less people there. And yet you still want your 20 or 30 years. We're going to hire people. You're not going to hire them. We probably have more people working at the school district than you're going to hire for a typical massive data center.
That is correct.
So the jobs thing is kind of BS. Now they get tax revenue from the building itself. I mean, it's taxable.
It's property.
So they do get tax revenue, and that's why some of the cities look at it and go, "Hey, we can get new tax revenue." That's great, but it doesn't help people get a job.
Well, and the thing is, you can get all the tax revenue that you want, but if the thing is taking up all the land and it's not generating enough people that are living there that are then buying
Good
from the
jobs.
stores and buying from the grocery stores and
Tax
buying.
revenue doesn't do you any good if nobody can live there.
That's right.
Well,
So,
and the other thing is the environmental impact of those things, which we haven't talked about, but the environmental impact can be fairly significant. Let's talk about it for just a second. I saw a story, an interview Actually, it was AOC. I know people don't know, everybody likes her, but she apparently traveled through, I think, Louisiana, Georgia, somewhere, and she met with people that they were building a big data center nearby, and every one of them could fill up their from their sink. They were filling up the water, and it was muddy because all that construction had basically contaminated or gotten mud or whatever you want to call it
They're
into the
stirring
water
up the
supply.
water. Yeah.
All that groundwater that everybody's using is now getting screwed up by these data centers. That's the again, that's the Erin Brockovich thing. You may not like her. I like the fact that she took a glass of water and a pitcher of water, set it on the table. The lawyers that were sitting there arguing they weren't screwing up the water supply when they were polluting the water until she said, as they were about to take a drink, she said, "Oh, by the way, that come from the well, the water supply in that town." Everybody set it down because they didn't want to drink it. Back to that original statement she made. Are you going to want to live next door to that? What about the lights and the noise? We have a local store that built here. I won't mention which one. We have a local store that built here.
I'm sorry, but I will mention it. It was a Dollar General because they are not a local store.
They are not local.
It is a corporation who came in and built a store.
Well, they're literally set up to come into small towns that people make less than 20,000.
And they built it right next to a beautiful home.
And they spend no time whatsoever trying to fit into that neighborhood.
No.
The people sold their house that they took great pride in. It was a beautiful home.
Beautiful home.
But the lighting from the parking lot literally lit up the side of their house 24/7.
Yes. And there was no effort looking and going, you could have faced it a different direction. You could have had
as
low
you said,
lights.
you could have shifted the store.
There were so many things that a good neighbor could have done that they didn't do it. The corporation came in, they bought the land, and they built it there, and the person had to sell their home. And guess what? I know the person, and they did not get the money out of it that they had put into it.
It lost
really devalued. And the next person who bought it, they just had it up for sale again. So
they got tired of the light shining in their window too.
Light. So it is a strong arm tactic, and it's happening not just with data centers; it's happening with corporate America.
Well, it's happened with rural America for a long time. It's the greater good, and again, I want them to build AI data centers. I just think they should spend more effort being good neighbors instead of bringing in the lawyers to strong arm people and not caring one way or the other.
Right.
I think some of these conflicts are avoidable. They don't have to do this.
So let's talk about that for a second. What would you do? Like if I'm somebody and I live in a small town and I'm listening to our podcast, what would you recommend that person go to their city manager or go to their town council or wherever they need to go? What would you do? Or what would you insist on before a data center came in and broke ground?
The first discussion we would have is profit sharing. Because we talked about earlier about they make all these promises about all the revenue that's going to happen, all the jobs, which we know is mostly crap.
Those will disappear after.
They're going to disappear. You're going to have a lot less people. There was a proposal which was a little large, but as Bernie Sanders did a proposal where they basically were going to do profit sharing with these, sort of like in Alaska where they pay out money, everybody gets a check for the amount of oil, or in Norway they do that. They have a massive fund that everybody gets money out of or whatever based on the resources from Norway. It's the same kind of idea. If you think this thing's going to be so profitable, then and it's so worth it to us, great.
So
let's do some profit sharing. Well, because think about it, the big corporations back 80, 90 years ago, 100 years ago, would not build electrical lines to these small towns.
No, they would not.
So these co-ops, just like the grain co-ops, these co-ops come in and they get together and they say, the members of the co-op own this. We're going to pool our resources. And in this case, it was electrical. They're going to pool our resources. We're going to build it there. And then you're going to have a say on how things work. And in theory, you're going to get dividend checks occasionally as well. I don't know how often, because I haven't got one from CTEC, but we are a member of a co-op for that exact reason. We at least get to vote on stuff.
Well, it's the same thing that you were like with the grain. Like you go out and you look at the original Hutto, Texas and places like that. They grew up around grain silos, and those cotton silos and grain silos that they had were because of co-ops, because one farmer, a railway was not going to come to that area just to buy from one farmer.
Correct.
But if I had 50 farmers that brought all of their grain or cotton to a centralized location, then it might be worth it for the railway to build there.
We had an auction barn that was built right
Yes.
next to the railroad here
Yes.
in Atlanta for 100.
So you're
20
talking
years.
data center co-ops.
I'm just talking about at least some kind of a sharing arrangement where the people continue to profit as long as that thing is making money.
Operational.
And by the way, you're going to have to put some kind of oversight in that because I know what that's like whenever they're going to share their profits and then they never declare that they have a profit.
Some
So number
transparency.
one, I would negotiate better. In other
Mhm.
words, and Nathan mentioned that on his, so I liked his idea about, he didn't mention the profit sharing, but he did mention better negotiation. The second thing is they have to be flexible on the path to build the infrastructure. People forget the infrastructure. They just focus on the building. When they're negotiating these cities,
You're talking about all the lines,
high
that
tension
feed it.
lines, the water and all that stuff. Would you want your house underneath a high voltage tension line?
No.
These things run hundreds of kilovolts. The electromagnetic field off these things is very strong.
Right.
There's been lots of studies that say that's bad. Of course, the electrical line people say it's not. Either way, I don't want it running right over the top. If you believe it's not bad, build your house under one.
Exactly. Walk a mile in my shoes.
And
so
so I
it's like,
think they need to be, even if it costs the company more money, they should be willing to move the lines.
I think you and I have had this conversation before when it comes to like, okay, your executive has to come live in this home for 1 year. You can.
Well, if they're going to argue against the idea, then they should, okay, then you come live here.
Right.
If you think it's so great, you come live here.
Mm-hmm.
Bring those lawyers, except they don't just get to fly in on the weekends or, like they do now.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I was,
Jets in Horseshoe Bay, and that's where they stay.
okay, here's another thing we're familiar with.
Okay.
We're going to go over tonight, I can tell you.
Okay,
But
so-
here's another thing we're familiar with. Roads.
Oh, the sand plants. Oh my goodness.
Those
All of
big
these-
old trucks destroy the roads. Did they
you go
offer
out
to
toward
rebuild them?
Brady, and they Voca specifically is a little town out toward Brady, and they built these sand plants, and they were hauling this dirt. And two of the things that they destroy the roads
They do.
because
And they do no maintenance on those
and they
roads.
do no maintenance on it, and don't pay for the counties to do the maintenance of the roads.
Right.
And the drivers always drive like a bat out of hell. I mean, so many accidents because of the sand trucks. They don't cover broken glass or anything like that. They don't cover they don't tarp it appropriately. And I have my CDL. I know what you should do whenever you're carrying grain or brock or
Put a tarp over it.
you put a tarp over it. They don't do it appropriately.
Right.
And they just didn't care. They just whatever. And they went out of business.
Yeah, and by the way, that's one of the things that I've found in my research was what happens if the center downsizes or goes out of business.
It's horrible.
That's another reason why they're claiming that they have to pay for that infrastructure because they've got all these tax breaks and stuff they asked for. They wanted all these great tax breaks. They go out of business, and now you're on the hook for the extra costs that haven't been paid off because they amortized it out over 30 or 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
They go out of business. There's no consequences.
You're
for
left
them.
holding the bag.
You're left holding the bag, especially if you use the local bond to build it.
Right.
Now you've got to pay for it.
And it's also just nasty. I mean, every time I go through Voca, there's these two huge
They
abandoned.
dug up these massive mountains of sand.
They
And
left
stuff,
them all piled
and they
there.
left it all piled there.
And-
Clean up. Oil industry has been notorious about not doing that in
Right.
Texas.
If your
forever.
data center goes out of business, what are you going to do to make it look better?
you
Are you
gotta
going to
clean
come
that
in and
stuff up.
disassemble it? Are you going to come tear it down? Or are you
You're
going
going to
to
turn it into a senior living facility and let old people live in your old data center building.
something?
They're big buildings, so maybe they should.
Yeah. So
All right, so I'm running. I'm going to run out of time. I know. So
you're fine. You're fine. I mean, it's been very educational. At least it has to me. I feel like data centers are a big concern that I do have.
yes.
And I understand that people are very against AI because of the types of data
Well, I think
centers
some
that it's
people use it
taking.
as an excuse. By the way, according to some of these rich people, it's a Chinese. The Chinese are actually causing people to not want to build. They're the ones that are pushing
Misinformation.
people. They're spreading misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a rich person and you believe that, come stay in our bed and breakfast,
Yes.
and we will take you out and show you.
Voca.
We'll show you what sand plants look like. We'll show you what lighting looks like shining on the side of somebody's house. I mean, just the little things here.
Okay.
We'll take you to Marble Falls and show you the destruction
Of the granite mine. The granite
no,
stuff.
that's not granite. That's those big sand. It's a big sand plant.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The rock
Massive
crushers.
sand plant, the rock crusher thing. Well, also you can talk to my brother who they came in and built one near his house, and they did blasting there some, and so everybody's windows kept getting cracked. He didn't. it devalued his house when he went to sell it, but he didn't. There's nothing he could do. There was no
Well,
recourse.
let's
And
not talk about that,
he
because
didn't
then
get
let's talk
profit
about
sharing.
having a golf course build a driving range facing your house
That's
and not be willing to.
that's not near as bad as a sand plant, I can
So
tell you.
yeah, that's true. Unless you get hit by the ball. Your dad got hit by one,
That's true.
and that was pretty
But
painful.
that's a different problem.
All
So
right.
can you make this positive? I absolutely believe you can.
How?
But I think the towns have to do stronger negotiation. That means they have to negotiate profit sharing and the stuff that politicians are already talking about. Funding the grid. Don't fund that grid connection cost. Should not be funded out of local bonds.
I think this is where the corporations and the people that are trying to build this are really at an advantage, because if I am a mayor or on the city council in a small town, I don't have that type of education. I don't know how to negotiate that deal. My city doesn't have these attorneys and stuff that are readily available to go in and be the landman. So maybe they should call you.
Well,
I mean, you've negotiated fiber coming into Llano.
I have.
You've negotiated,
And my uncle
all sorts of
spent all this years negotiating oil rights to get a car.
maybe they should call you and say, Jim, I want you to come to our city and sit down with, and here's our city attorney. Sit down and let's talk
I
about.
would be happy to
what
have
we
a
do.
class or two to help them understand the infrastructure and the AI and all the pieces that go with it. I don't think this problem is going to go away, but I don't think people are going to stop. I think we have a Jevons paradox thing. Keep having people saying that AI is going to crash any day now and it's all going to go away. We talk about that all the time. It's more of a wave than a bubble, meaning that even if it crashes down some, it's still going to keep moving forward. It's not going away. There's a lot of things that can be done to make it more palatable to people. Just like when they made these grain co-ops and they made these electrical co-ops, people allowed that electrical lines to come across their land, but they got paid to them. And it wasn't at the time they got paid, but they also got electricity dropped to their house.
Right.
So they allowed it for less. But when you start talking about high tension lines, either bury them or move them further away from
Yeah, I mean, and we are in wide open spaces out here. I mean, and yes, it would cost more money not to run the tension line within 50 feet of somewhere.
Well, because they want to minimize the distance.
They want as the crow flies.
Because they got to build the copper. They got to pay for the copper to get it there, and they want to minimize their costs. Well, guess what? Tough. Amortize that. Put that into your token costs when you start generating it, because it isn't right for you to exploit people and come in with your lawyers and steamroll them. That should not be your opening gamut.
But unfortunately,
come in with that attitude that they're just small town people. What do they matter? There's only 12,000 people in Llano County. Millions of people want to use these data centers. So who
decides the cost of a life?
The greater good always comes up in these discussions. That's what eminent domain is all about, right?
Right.
Just because you can do it doesn't mean it's the right way. And the problem is the bad press they're getting from it. You live in a world of social media. You live in a world where people are looking for a cause to get behind. And there's enough people that don't like AI that they've latched onto these data centers, which I said was going to happen in this political, climate we live in, and the year, what's going on this year. These people have latched onto these data centers as a physical focus of their hatred of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, I think there's a way to make them more palatable. But you have to be willing to absorb not just the cost, but you have to be more transparent about what's going to happen, what you need to get it done, the local economy, the local impact, and stop this crap with it's going to bring all these jobs.
They're temporary.
They're temporary, and they're not going to be enough.
Yeah. My name is Maurie. I'm here with my husband, Jim. Thank you guys so much for listening to AI in Action. We hope y'all have a marvelous rest of the week.